behind the scenes, particularly in an election year, there's all sorts of conversations that are going on between Labour and the sort of Tories on a number of different levels, from trying to get donors across, from trying to get advisors to kind of change and switch across and add some value. There's also a whole lot of conversations that take place, by the way, that are private.
Why should Keir Starmer keep David Cameron on as Foreign Secretary?
Oh, look, Matt, this is a bit tongue-in-cheek. It's one of those ideas that, had someone walked into my office when I worked in Number 10 and suggested the opposite, I would have said, that's interesting, and then moved on very quickly. But, there is something in the idea of retaining, the experienced, the able, the patriotic, and David's all of those things, right? His appointment, I think, has definitely increased our standing, a touch on the global stage. There's a feeling that we have a grown-up back in the room, and that's no bad thing. And one of the problems I think we have in our system, is that the experienced and battle-worn, if you like, too often fade away. Just at the time when they've really got something of value to offer. I've done a number of chats on my podcast with people, politicians and civil servants, who you can't help feeling, if only they were still in politics, they're more relaxed, they're more comfortable. You've done the same, I'm sure, in interviews. They have a sort of less tribal view of the world. And I think that we could all do with a bit more of that. William Hague, I think, is another example, though I don't think he would consider coming back even if the Tories win, frankly.
Is it actually more of a reflection of the state of the Tory party that David Cameron being back among them actually just highlights how much more capable he is as a politician? That's more of a reflection of the Tory party than it is anything to do with the Labour Party.
Well, it is to a touch, yeah, to an extent, because obviously it's not been a good period, is it? Let's be frank, and and as we head towards an election, there are real issues for the Tory party, and I think that David's arrival has reminded people, not everybody, some people take a totally different view, particularly if you put it through the prism of Brexit. But I think it has reminded people that that David's time as Prime Minister, until it went wrong, was relatively calm. It felt relatively grown up. Certainly, I think people feel that about the coalition period. And of course, the coalition period, you have people who do different parties. And that's another point, is that if we look at the last example, when you had people from different parties around the cabinet table, actually it worked pretty well for a while. I hesitate to say that it was a golden period of politics, but people certainly felt that there were some grown-ups involved, and that it was a little less tribal, a little less aggressive, a little less kind of panicked, if you like. And there's a benefit from that. And also there's the Labour have got plenty of precedent for reaching out, across the divide, if you like. Gordon was all about it, in his early days as Prime Minister, the government of all the talents. And this, Matt, right? Behind the scenes, particularly in an election year, there's all sorts of conversations that are going on between Labour and the sort of Tories on a number of different levels, from trying to get donors across, from trying to get advisors to kind of change and switch across and add some value. There's also a whole lot of conversations that take place, by the way, that are private, right, around the dinner party table. Full well that there are very significant members of the Labour Party who spend an awful lot of time socially with members of the Conservative Party. So, if there's a serious point in this, frankly, slightly tongue-in-cheek suggestion, is that, well, why don't we just bring all that out a bit? Why don't we be a bit more honest about the value of experience in politics?
I suppose the million-dollar question is, do you think David Cameron would do it?
I do, actually. That's the one thing that I'd feel reasonably confident about, because in the end, what is this? This is an appeal to represent the country abroad, which I think he loves doing. And it's a chance, frankly, if you looked at it even through a sort of selfish lens, it's a chance for a PS on his career that's pretty impressive. Listen, I also think if it went wrong, Sir Keir gets to fire a Tory Prime Minister, which I suspect is something that he's kind of dreamt about for a number of years, possibly for as long as he's been in politics. So it's a win-win, isn't it, Matt? It's a win-win.
So, I mean, obviously, what Keir Starmer's trying to do is fire the current Tory Prime Minister.
But
What
there
have
you
you
are.
made?
You get a 2 for 1. I mean,
What have
it's
you made of what's been going on this week? You've been there in the bunker of Downing Street and in opposition as well. When everything's going wrong, what have you made of the way that Number 10 have handled this? You know, it took them a long time to do anything about Lee Anderson and what he said. It's taken them a long time to come, you know, in news cycle terms anyway, to come to the conclusion that what this Tory donor said was racist. What do you make of the current operation?
Well, this one I think was should have been swift and straightforward. It is undeniably racist, and it was undeniably an appalling thing to have said. And although it's a very difficult situation for the party, it's actually a very easy one in a way from a communications point of view. It's undeniable. But I'm loath to dive in and criticise, professionals inside Number 10, because more often, than not, there's some other angle going on. There's some other problem. There's some, operational kind of, screw up going on internally that causes the process not to be what it should be. So you can't always blame the advisors, is all I would say. You gotta look at the politicians too, in my view. But I don't know the wiring of this particular problem. But for me, I was surprised that it took quite as long as it did to get the line clear.
And time is running out if he wants to call a May election. Where are you on the question of whether or not to do an election in May or in the autumn?
I've always thought that it will be in November because they're going to want to give themselves as long a run as possible to see whether or not the economy can tick up. We've got the numbers today; they're a little bit better, but they're certainly not good enough. And I don't think that a campaign now organised, on the hoof, is going to improve the outcome for them at all. I think if I were there, I would definitely be arguing to leave it as long as you possibly can, and November feels about right to me.